the end of the first stage. After the sketch, we're laying in some really light washes of black, just using black, adding more water to create lighter variations, less water to create darker variations. But now we want to get rid of this kind of sketchy watercolor look. And so that's going to require the addition of white in addition to black. So I think it's going to be best to start in the background. You always want to start with large areas and then work your way through. So, same thing that I did in the last demonstration is I'm going to dampen. It's probably still a little damp. I'm going to wet this down a little so that I can spread a lot of paint over a large area in a short period of time. Same thing, and this has had time to dry, so whatever I did 15 minutes ago is not loosening. It's already dried into the surface. Okay. Now, if you remember the previous demo, I was kind of careless. I was kind of scrubbing it around. And now you want to apply the paint more slowly, a little bit more carefully. Okay. So, I'm going to keep the paint and switch to the nicer brush. This one is kind of, see how it's got a curve in it. So I'm just using this to wet the paper, but I'm going to apply paint with this one. And I'm going to keep another brush handy to move it around if I need to. A little water, a little white. See if I can show this to you. White. Now I'm going to put just a tiny bit of black in it to make a really light gray. Because when you look at that background, most of it is gray. Okay. And I'm going to start where I did the last time, upper corner here, and I'm going to begin. When you have large areas, you don't want to paint them like you're painting a wall. This way, because it'll stand out. You'll see it. That's the first thing people will notice is the streaks of your painting from going up and down or left to right. So you want to crisscross. You kind of just left, right, and weave the paint. And it gives you a really nice, smooth surface. Grab a little more. Always put just a tiny, just the tip of the brush in water. Come back. See, I'm taking my time now because I want to make sure I don't mess up my boundaries. Working quick and loose for the first stage is good because it keeps you from being afraid to actually paint on it. But then as we come to this second layer, left and right, because you want to be a lot more careful, it's darker here. So all I'm going to do is take the upper corner of my brush and just barely dip into a little black. That's dry. Okay. And then come back to where I started and then do the same thing. Crisscross. And you can blend it in and it gets a little darker. We do that again. Put a little water this time. A tiny dab here. It can be scary the first time you put that on there because, man, that's really dark. But when you work it around, you see it blends in. Again, really going to darken it because it's not getting dark enough. Because I'm spreading it too far out. Again. I just want to not push it so far over. Now I'm going to use this brush. Because I don't have any paint on this brush, I'm going to use it to kind of stop the spread. So that's why you need to always consider working with more than one brush at a time. You can already see the difference in how the surface looks. And white, black gets really thin real easy. But white requires a little more water to get it to look like this. So it's nice to use it in the second layer, not the first. All right, I'm going to proceed to work my way down here. Okay, and it's important here. You have a shadow, you have shadows too. The last thing we want to do is cover up our shadows that we spent a half an hour painting. Okay, so I'm concentrating, working around the shadows first. Let me get a little more water. Okay, here. And when I'm almost out of paint, after spreading it, now I want to real lightly come into my shadow using the same kind of crisscross so I don't cover it up so easily and then have to paint it all over again. Yeah. No need to add any more paint to the brush. I don't want to lose where my cast shadow is. See, it's still there. I'm going to need to make it darker the same way I darken that. I'm going to switch to this brush, dip into a little black, come back in here. Smaller strokes. And then use this one again, a little water, into my gray, come back over here, I'm not going to panic, come this way, take some extra off, and do the same thing, just feather it out, lightly touching, just lightly touching. It's going to blend right into your shadow. Okay, now I've spent quite a bit of time over on this side. I would say before moving on that way, I take a little water one more time and wet that. So it gives you a little more work time. Okay? Not to the point where it's dripping, but just so that it's damp. And see, right now it's damp, but I can feel that it's getting kind of dry. And this is not going to work the same way on a dry surface. Okay? So, again, you can see how smooth it is now. And it's best to kind of get the hang of it in the large space before you come to the smaller ones. Okay, now, when you come to the smaller areas in here, this is not going to work. This is not going to work. But you're going to probably be using brushes that fit in there more appropriately, see? And give you more control. But the same technique, exact same thing. Now, in a little while, I want to show you that that's a problem. Actually, we'll take care of it right now. You know, that was just from the demonstration, but that's really dark. But just to show you how it's possible to take care of that in here. Okay, that's one layer. Let that dry in a few minutes. and come back and do exactly the same thing, and that heavy stain is going to go away. Okay, so that's why, you know, you shouldn't be too worried if something gets too dark. You know, like the shadows. I said, don't be afraid to make them too dark, because if we find that they are, well, we just lighten them up the same way. Okay. When you get to the stuff inside, and even for this background, again, this isn't nailed down. If it's easier for you to reach something, turn your painting around, especially when you're working in this area. Okay? And of course, if you have your guide, you can turn that upside down so you don't get lost. But make it easier for yourself, because let's say, you know, you're right-handed. Well, this is on the right side. But over here, it might feel kind of weird having to do that. So turn it over so that this is more comfortable for a right-hander, or vice versa for a lefty. Okay? Any questions? Don't be afraid. It's only paint. Okay?